Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs.
This episode goes deep into what ETH is doing to really support founders and the Swiss ecosystem. We speak to Vanessa Wood, Vice President for Knowledge Transfer and Corporate Relations at ETH, and Frank Floessel, Head of ETH Entrepreneurship. Together, they give a behind-the-scenes look at how ETH is becoming a much more founder-friendly place, from faster spin-off processes to new ways of supporting both research-based ventures and student startups. We also get into the bigger picture, what ETH is doing to strengthen entrepreneurship in Switzerland, where the ecosystem has improved and where serious challenges still remain, from helping technical founders get closer to the market to the structural funding gaps Europe still needs to solve.
Welcome to another Swisspreneur episode. Today I'm joined by Frank and Vanessa, who are both here from ETH Entrepreneurship. Today we'll talk about ETH Entrepreneurship, obviously, from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, the spin-off and startup factory, as we like to call it, but also the ecosystem itself and ETH's role in it. But first of all, welcome. How are you today?
So far, so good.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having us.
Well, happy that you're here. And I would love, I already said it a little bit, you're both here from ETH Entrepreneurship, but maybe you can both quickly introduce yourselves, what roles you have at ETH and where you come from, basically, what your background is. Vanessa, maybe you want to start.
So I'm a professor at ETH in electrical engineering, and for the last 5 years, I've also had the pleasure of serving as Vice President for Knowledge Transfer and Corporate Relations. And this means I'm basically in charge of all the partnerships ETH has with industry, with government agencies, with nonprofits, in charge of IP and licensing topics, ETH entrepreneurship, and also our science policy activities. And it was very cool to recruit Frank about 2.5 years ago to lead ETH Entrepreneurships, which is one of the units within the vice presidency.
Which leads us to you, Frank. Who are you?
Yes, my name is Frank Floessel. I studied electrical engineering from 93 to 99, so the last century, as I always say. And I co-founded ETH Juniors during my time at ETH. And then in 99, I started a company called Tempo Brain that I bootstrapped from 0 to 40 million revenue and 600 employees, and sold it in 2015. Then I spent some time in the family office area, did the obligatory crypto fund, as one did in these times, and was also involved in venture. And then, as Vanessa said, 2.5 years ago, I was doom scrolling on LinkedIn, and I found this ad for head of entrepreneurship, and I thought, wow, this might be spectacular because it's something completely different. I never had a boss before that. And I thought, and I knew Vanessa from the board of ETH Juniors, and we talked, and then she took the risk of hiring me.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
And you were also already on the Swisspreneur podcast, so make sure everybody to listen in to that episode.
Yeah.
So today we want to talk about ETH Entrepreneurship, like I said, but maybe talking a little bit more about you both. So Frank, you just mentioned you founded and led several companies, and you've also studied at the ETH. When you look back into the last century, like you said, what would you say, which early experience shaped you most as an entrepreneur?
Well, for me, the craziest reaction I got when I started my company was probably the reaction from my parents. So I come from a family of engineers. My father studied at ETH. My grandfather is a professor, or was a professor of engineering. And I came home and said, I founded the company. And they said, are you crazy? Why would you throw away your ETH diploma that you just got? And they couldn't really understand why I would choose that path. And 10 years later, when we had a party at the Kaufleuten in Zurich and 600 employees and the Fantastic Four showed up for a secret party, I think then they got the idea that this path might have worked out.
And can you tell us a little bit more about ETH Juniors?
Absolutely. So ETH Juniors is a student-led company, a student-led association actually. It's a really strange concept. So basically, it can only be run by students. So as soon as you get a master's diploma, you must leave juniors. You go out there and you acquire clients. If you acquire clients, you don't have the knowledge to solve the project. So you need to go at ETH and find the person who then can solve the project, because that person has the actual knowledge. ETH juniors, they act as project managers. And if you don't find clients, you cannot get a salary or anything. And the whole team, to make it a bit more complex, changes about every 18 months. So it's about 10 to 15 people. And every 18 months, they cycle through a whole team. So within the last 28 years, we had about 300 people that were ETH juniors. We then founded ETH seniors, where the lost souls of juniors were kind of collected again. And now we have ETH seniors events. We have almost more than 30 startups coming out of that group, including Get Your Guide, Climeworks, Beekeeper, many success stories. And yeah, all student run and out of ETH Zurich.
What would you say is the most striking thing to you from working with both students and companies at the same time?
Well, to me, the most amazing finding was that even though at that time you're still a student and you think you have no expertise, but that lack of expertise you can compensate by enthusiasm and pure energy. And companies love that because they tend to run out of energy. So getting infused by some crazy juniors who come with crazy ideas and actually make it work, that really helps both sides.
And Vanessa, would you say that this kind of concept, or this also these like enthusiasm infusing, I think you used as a word, the companies with this young spirit, is this something that also motivated you to take on a role that also connects ETH more directly with industry and future founders?
Yeah, absolutely. It's incredibly inspirational to see all the fantastic creative ideas and discoveries coming out of ETH research labs, students coming up with ideas. So that's incredibly motivating. And yeah, I think it's fantastic to see research happening at ETH then have impact in the real world. So being able to support that at ETH is a great job.
And you mentioned already as well, you're a professor, and now you're from knowledge transfer. So your career spans research, department leadership, and corporate relations and knowledge transfer. So you've seen hundreds of collaborations between ETH and industry. What experience from those early years kind of still guide you on how to think about supporting founders?
Well, yeah, I mean, at ETH, actually, it's not just hundreds of
thousands.
It's close to 2,000
Incredible
partnerships we have every year. And, between startups and spinoffs, roughly 30 to 40 per year. So it's really a lot of things that come through our office and that we can help get on their way. But I think it comes back again to the inspiration that comes from seeing an idea that at some point become a product. And to be part of that as a researcher, part of a team, either in the corporate world that takes that idea and builds it into something, or if you're an entrepreneur and you take that path, building that idea into your own company, that's really fantastic. And so I think what we need at ETH and at most universities is you need the framework conditions to make that happen as seamlessly as possible. And you need also people like Frank and others in the team who also have that experience from the outside and can help the researchers realize that, it's not just the technology alone that makes a company, but often other aspects that sometimes us academic researchers tend to forget. And so to build teams with diverse backgrounds, both excellent science and technology, but also understanding of, what the market is, what customers need, how to talk to customers, that's really important. And that's what we try to facilitate at ETH Entrepreneurship.
I think this actually perfectly leads me to the next question. Can you explain to us, Frank, how would you explain your team's role to a researcher or a student that has never heard of E cubed, which is the E and the 3 before, and also what does that stand for?
So E cubed is typical nerd language für ETH entrepreneurship ecosystem, right? E times E times E. So E to the power of 3, right? That's that was a kind of an idea here. So we have a simple mission. We help entrepreneurs to get founded and get funding and then foster the whole ecosystem. That's like the shortest answer.
And what made you, or what was the moment, maybe that question actually is for you, Vanessa, but I think also for you in that sense as well, Frank. What was the moment when you realized we need to modernize the approach that we currently have?
Well, I started as vice president 5 years ago, and one of the first things I did was I went around to all of the 16 academic departments at ETH and also talked to a lot of external stakeholders who work with ETH. So these would be lawyers who support our spinoffs and startups through the founding process, venture capitalists who invest in our spinoffs, and also former founders. And I tried to get a sense of what they felt could be improved. And one of the feedbacks that I got very clearly was we need more founder-friendly processes and conditions at ETH because there's so much amazing research and ideas that people are inspired to transform into companies, but that's just not happening quickly enough, and that often it becomes too much of a sort of the feeling that ETH is actually impeding the progress of starting spinoffs. So that became my goal to say, how can we change that? How can we include then researchers and people in the ecosystem in that process to create something hopefully that really works and is successful both for ETH and our founders.
And then when you joined, Frank, what were things that you saw immediately where you said, okay, we need to work on that, we need to modernize it?
Well, the one thing I just didn't understand, and I thought first I was maybe too stupid, but I didn't understand first, how can you judge a company pre-seed round on evaluation and therefore on an amount of equity that ETH should have? And why does that take 12 months to negotiate? Because I realized in these early stages, speed is of the essence. So now also with the new regulations, right, we say we prefer to take 2% right now in an express way, then negotiate 1 year and take 10%, because these 2% might be worth more than 12 months later, the 10%. Because the company losing 12 months in today's time is like 10 years time ago, right? So this is really day and night between the speed that they either have or when they leave ETH are already burned out. And I've seen burned out founders after having finished their discussions and their license talks, and it's like, okay, now we have to start the company. And they were already down. And I thought that was really sad because the ideas were great and it's not needed that there's such a hurdle to get the company spun out.
When we talked earlier, you already mentioned that in like the first month or so, you went to your colleagues and you said, we want to do this, 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 and that. What were the things that you wanted to implement right at the beginning, but took you a little more time to implement, or what actually came out of it by now?
Well, I think so. When I joined ETH first, I was really this idea of making it as fast as possible, this whole spin-out process. And I spoke to some friends and colleagues, and one said, well, you should make it 2-2-2. And I said, what does that mean? Well, you should take 2% equity, 2% license fees, and be done in 2 weeks. And that was for a long time the guiding principle to say, okay, this is a challenge. But I think then in the end, we made it somewhat close to that.
Is that the equity and licensing policy, the one and only?
Yeah.
What do you think are the most reassuring elements of it, Vanessa?
Well, I think we've hopefully added a lot of transparency into the process. We've given future founders and their investors a sense of what ETH expects, very clearly written down, what sort of information we need from the founders to expedite the process, and also tried to, make it, very easy where it's not some black box where then, hidden behind some formulas we come up with something. It's basically, if you read the document, you know approximately what deal you can get from ETH and how fast we're going to be able to deliver it for you. And I think that provides a lot of reassurance to entrepreneurs, and they should be focused on all the problems that come with starting a company, not on negotiating with their home university, who should be supporting them.
So can you guide me through it? How does it work? So I'm a student, I knock on your door. What happens?
First, you come to our place, and we have so-called entrepreneur managers. They basically just help you to show you the way that this would take, right? So we would talk about the idea that you have, and what's the scientific foundation behind it, what's the research behind it, and then give you an idea of which direction this could go. And then we'd have to send you to ETH transfer to get the patent, or ETH creates the patent and gives you then a global license. And after that, you will come back to us, and we would help you with a program called Investor Connect, connect you to investors, connect you to venture capitalists, make sure you get funding, make sure you meet your co-founders maybe as well, make sure you are part of this ecosystem, and help you get started.
So what kind of skills does your team have? Because I mean, the people must understand the like technologies, the research, but also the whole startup ecosystem, right?
Yep. I have a great team. Yep. I'm not saying anything about this. I'm very happy to have that team. It's an amazing. It's 19 members, and they're all amazing. Yeah. I really think it's super important because they get confronted with a lot of the similar questions, right? And they need to help these people to become successful founders. And I love the enthusiasm in my team. I also try to encourage them to really also be bold and be creative and have new ideas, and just try to improve the ecosystem and help the people.
And in comparison to a few years ago, how is it different, or has it improved?
I think so, and that's certainly the feedback I'm getting from the ecosystem. I think one important thing we've added is sort of two paths. So we have now the path to become an ETH startup. And this is primarily for students who are at ETH, but their idea for their company isn't coming out of ETH research. So maybe some students have met, talked over, drinks one evening, and they have this great idea for an app they want to program to change the world. And so now we have this label called the ETH Startup label, where those students can actually go to Frank's team, get support, potentially join an entrepreneurship program. We recently started an accelerator specifically to support student-based companies that aren't coming out of ETH research labs. And so that's completely new as of this summer. And then we, I think, also have made substantial improvements to this, what Frank just described, which is the process for ETH spinoffs. So this means companies that are coming out of ETH research ideas. And now we've tried to make it very clear the steps they take, first going to Frank's team, then if they need a license, getting the license from the tech transfer team, and then having access to this ecosystem, which includes now favorable rates on, for instance, rental or infrastructure usage of ETH. So as they take this journey of transforming their scientific ideas or technologies into a product.
And how do you support especially researchers? Because going from a lab to building a company it's quite a difference, right? How do you support them in owning also this like company builder role?
Well, I believe so when I look back at my time as an active entrepreneur, the one thing I really always enjoyed was listening to experiences of other entrepreneurs. I was a long-time member of EO and YPO, and there we had the forum concept. So teaching through experience, lived experiences, real experiences, was for me always the most valuable part of these groups. And that's what we're trying to do. We have entrepreneurs in residence, people who've been there and done that. And we do Ask Me Anything lunches where founders can ask questions. We coach them. We just make sure that, the experiences that the last generation of founders had get passed on to the new generation. And that's pretty much all you can do. There is not that much more, right? You can, of course, also try to find clients. We have also meetings where we try to bring clients, possible future clients, together with the founders. We bring them together with investors. But other than that, it's their skill set that they have to develop themselves.
And what is the ratio of like research-based versus the startups that you mentioned?
Well, this is the first year we have it, so we don't have a lot of data yet, but it looks like we have about, potentially, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, you have the newest numbers, but this year we'll probably be ending with about 2 times as many spin-offs as startups. But I think because we've only had this concept in place since July, I think you can only really talk about trends maybe a few years from now.
But even 6 months, that's not a bad number.
Well, when I think back, Tempo Brand was exactly such a startup idea, right? We didn't have research results. Well, we just had a few beers too many, and then we started with this idea, right?
Yeah.
And that's how many good ideas start. Now with the Opportunity Accelerator that we started together with UBS, we have now 7 of those projects that we help for 3 months to accelerate. And these are amazing ideas. They come from students. They don't come out of research, but it just shows that the creativity of students is really at, I guess, when they get their masters at their peak, and they just come up with great ideas. And helping those ideas too, I think is a great additional benefit now from ETH.
Do you think that explains also the amount of growth that we see in the spin-offs of ETH, or is there any other reasons why you think we have so incredibly high numbers?
Well, I think when you look at the spin-off side, right, of the deep tech side, deep tech now became a much bigger word than I think it was 5 or 10 years ago, right? And every SaaS investor now is a deep tech investor, as a little joke on the side. But deep tech is I think a topic where Europe can excel or can come back to the world and produce big companies. And social networks they kind of missed, right? I mean, this whole wave went ahead. And now I think with deep tech, we see manufacturing is close there. It's hard tech. It's building things, not just programming. And I think there ETH just has a great reputation and produces great talent. And with that level of education, there comes a great level of research, which attracts great professors. They produce more research. And out of this research, eventually, there's coming spin-offs that really produce, to be simple, the stuff that the world needs, right?
Do you have any a quality markers to analyze if they actually bring good stuff into the world?
So we have, for example, the Pioneer Fellowship Program, which is a deep tech incubation program, which gives you 18 months time and 150,000 Swiss francs to transport your idea from research into, I'd say, pilot stage. And there we get great ideas and we vet them, and we I think I'd say about a third gets that fellowship. And we always have these ideas vetted also by other professors from other universities to really see what's the quality of the research there. And yeah, I mean, that these are great projects, I think, that come out of it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Frank and I talk a lot about is building on layers and layers of entrepreneurs so that current students, current researchers see what's come before them. And I think there is absolutely the aspect, and that's why we often talk about the ecosystem, is what we see is, where there have been professors and research groups who've been successful at launching spin-offs, you start seeing a clustering effect where then entrepreneurial students go to that professor and say, hey, I want to do something also, and I want to be an entrepreneur too. And I think this is also really important. We at ETH Entrepreneurship, yes, we're the main staff unit looking and sort of overseeing all entrepreneurship activities at ETH, but we really believe that also entrepreneurship has to happen on the ground in clusters of excellence around certain topics. So you get all the great robotics people together thinking about what challenges robotics can solve. You get the AI people together thinking about how can we use AI to address some of the global challenges. We're starting, programs in space, commercial space technology. And I think by having then these clusters of excellence, which ETH often organizes under as centers, so these interdisciplinary units, then through that you start to really get a feedback mechanism where you attract people who care about entrepreneurship, who want to spend time in entrepreneurship by seeing the example. And I think that's the critical mass now that ETH is starting to achieve. And you start seeing the entrepreneurs of Frank's generation who are also really excited now to come back to ETH and help out that younger generation. And I think that's what, Switzerland is also now really achieving.
Which brings me to my ecosystem question. If you compare it to, let's say, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, what kind of differences do you see in the ecosystem?
I think there's like 3 points, I would say. First of all, becoming an entrepreneur is now a career choice. People really think of that. When I graduated in 99, that was not a real thing, right? It was either you go to investment bank, consulting firm, or you stay in research, or you go to an industrial company, right? Become an entrepreneur was not really a thing. And now it is, right? And as Vanessa said, there's now also generations before you that you can look up to and say, hey, I still know these guys from my studying. It was just a few semesters older. I can do that too, right? So it's also a bit this idea of having generations before you. Second of all, I think there's a crazy amount of funding available, especially now for deep tech ideas. This is unbelievable. It used to be the idea you start with a 5 million valuation, you raise 1 million, then maybe 25 and 5 million, that are typical metrics. Now I see pre-seed rounds of 5 to 7 million. I'm not sure how the metric works, but I'm sure they didn't give away the company. So the valuations are really skyrocketing, and that attracts more people, right? Because when you have more money at that stage of a company, of course, you can also waste it, but I think you can just really progress crazy fast, right? And you can really hire big teams and really get stuff done as well with the whole wave of AI, which I would say is the third reason, right? You have, with AI and other tools, you have so much more possibilities to do that it became, so to say, easier to get started and going.
Would you say, like, for you it's the same, or maybe specifically also at the ETH ecosystem?
I think it's transformed tremendously in the 15 years I've been at ETH. I think I came from MIT, and I remember, thinking one key difference I saw between MIT and ETH when I first arrived was just the number of people talking about entrepreneurship. And, at MIT, I felt like half my classmates were we're doing something entrepreneurial, and at ETH, it was still a sort of new and rare thing to be talking about entrepreneurship. In 2011, I remember it was when I arrived, and also when the ETH Entrepreneurship Club, which is the student association, was founded. And I remember I helped them organize, one of their first pizza lunches, and brought in, a speaker for them. And you could feel that this was starting to become something that students were getting excited about, but it wasn't yet there and present as part of ETH. And now I think 15 years later, you have so many students talking about entrepreneurship. I think you have departments, when they're interviewing faculty members, also thinking about, has that faculty member done a spinoff? Are they going to be an entrepreneurial professor? How are they going to contribute to the ecosystem? So it's really a shift within ETH, and I think it goes back to some of the core values and mandate ETH has to really be a source of innovation for Switzerland and to support the Swiss economy. So I think it's fantastic to see this change that we've seen. And it's I think inherently always been there, because I think ETH students are fantastic, and Frank's a great example of one of the early pioneers of entrepreneurship, but I think it goes far back into the ETH tradition. ETH is now 170 years old. So I think you see examples of fantastic entrepreneurship, which are now worldwide companies that have been founded from ETH, but now it's something people talk about and want to foster and encourage. So I think that's really terrific.
It's also insane, right? Thinking about that. I mean, you just said 2011 when the Entrepreneur Club started. I mean, 10 to 15 years. In hindsight, it's not that much of a time, but today, I mean, maybe we're also in a bubble, but still, it's so buzzing. That's incredible, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It's absolutely, it's buzzing because being creative and translating that creativity into a venture became much easier.
It's true.
Right? Everything is just much more, shorter distances. I mean, the web, transformed everything. Right? We're just so connected all the time, and everything becomes so easy. I remember when I started, dial-ups, that was the thing. So you don't do much stuff with dial-up connections. And I remember when we started the company, we downloaded our web page like once a day. Right? Otherwise, it would have been too expensive, right? So we connected to the server, and we downloaded, and that was it. Right? Being online all the time was like, guys, you're nuts. Right?
What kind of gaps do you both still see?
Well, I think, now we've done a great job putting in these framework conditions. I think these have to be really lived and implemented and constantly, worked on and improved. So one of the things that I think we did already, but I hope, really continues now regularly, is we co-wrote many of the terms and conditions with like the top law firms who support our spinoffs. And that was really helpful because we tried to anticipate from them based on all the many, if you count everyone's experience who are on these calls contributing to these regulations, you have, decades of experience and seeing all the different problems that can originate. And we really tried to address in a constructive way, figure out, okay, this is a problem we've seen several times. Can we just figure out one formulation that everyone feels solves basically most of the issues? But things evolve, topics like, do you allow ETH technology to be licensed for military use, and in which countries? These are topics that then you're constantly going to have to amend potentially our baseline license agreements and templates to address, new developments, for instance, in software, open source, or, proprietary software. So technology evolves. And so I hope really that the process that we've started of seeking the input from external stakeholders continues in a regular format. So it doesn't get to the point where we say, oh, everyone's complaining, where we can just really proactively say, hey, if we see a pattern where something needs to be addressed, we now have the contacts, and the people also feel comfortable coming to us and saying, hey, we see something that could be improved. Let's just go fix it. Let's be also a little bit entrepreneurial. Since we're trying to support entrepreneurship, let's be entrepreneurial in how we evolve the frameworks. So I think that's one thing that I hope is I think we have to see these, what we've put in place as a fantastic start, but something that should evolve with the times and the needs. And I think also that we've done a lot with programs, but I think these can even be further improved and structured to really ensure that they're setting the companies up for success, and that we're, of course, providing a supportive environment, but are also making sure the companies, when they get out of the ETH bubble, are also fit to sometimes take on global markets.
I think when I take a bit of different take and take a step back and look at the ecosystem, then we hear in Switzerland a lot like, oh, there's late stage funding gap and things like this, and there's a lot of people being involved with that. I don't believe that. Right? I think, first of all, great ideas always find funding, and we don't need to go to San Francisco and put a wall up and say, hey, come invest in Switzerland, right? That's not what it's about. It's about the main problem, I believe, that the European venture capital scene has, or the whole industry has, is there is no off-ramp. So New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ have 3 times the daily liquidity than all European exchanges combined. And if I don't know how I get out of a position at the Series B or C, it would have to be a strategic sale, but that's, going or not going. I just cannot create liquidity, then we're not going to invest in that stage. Right? And in the US with NASDAQ, you have such deep books, you have such high liquidity that going public there just makes sure it's a liquidity event. You have much easier way of you have your own currency then, because you have your shares you can pay employees with. It's much easier to raise capital there to finance the company further. And as long as Europe does not have somewhat a united new market for venture companies who want to go public late stage, that's going to be our major issue. Right? Because the early stages I can get out with secondaries if there's a big investor coming in Series A or B, but late stage, that's not going to happen. I think that is the biggest gap at the moment that we see, that we will eventually have to solve. And I think then we really don't have to shy away to be compared to the US.
Is there anything that you see that institutions can already do to still support ventures that get to that stage and have that problem at that stage?
Well, either they go listing at NASDAQ, I've seen that, right? Or strategic sales. But then the problem there is, it's, I think, the main issue that you have in this whole venture capital private equity industry, because venture capital pays a bit in crazy numbers, right? Pays 100 times revenue, and private equity like to pay 5 times EBITDA. And these numbers don't match. So eventually, there's going to be a problem if you try to exit a venture capital position. You either have to take a big discount and get kind of a reality check, or you stay in there and say, no, it's going to be okay, it's going to eventually come, but then you're stuck in that position forever, right? And with that, I think we just need some kind of a additional liquidity in the stock market.
And if we look into at the ETH ecosystem, and maybe that kind of already also plays into that, what kind of metrics could, or maybe you already have implemented, or would you like to implement to make sure that it's healthy and that the startups can accelerate?
I think measure a health of an ecosystem. I think there are quantitative metrics and there are qualitative metrics. I think what we want to see is, of course, researchers coming and saying, hey, I have an idea. How could we make this happen? And I think that also even starts very early on in how professors set up the strategies of their research groups. How do they think strategically about IP? So, are they talking, for instance, to their students about, as new ideas come up, say, hey, maybe that's something we could patent, or let's figure out how to set up this great code database that we're going to create into something that can later be commercialized. Or, hey, we have these amazing data sets. What are we going to be doing with these? For research, of course, that's really important. That's the core mission for research and teaching, but also then keeping that background of how could this be commercialized, whether it's working with an established industry partner or creating a founding. So I think health of the ecosystem is making sure that commercialization is an option that people think about and talk about inside the research groups. And we see that when through a number of inquiries that we come to our tech transfer office, and then hopefully then we're giving these researchers good advice about how to set that up. So that's one metric of health that I would use for the ecosystem. This is kind of the source of research-based ideas. And then we always look at, how many people are coming to Frank, and we're tracking time. So we also want to make sure that we're not the hurdle in people who are excited about entrepreneurship starting a company. So now one of our key metrics that we track is the times tasks are with us. So for instance, between the first meeting with Frank's team, how long does it take the future founder to then come back? How long does the process take at tech transfer? What is the time for us to sign a shareholder agreement, get a rental agreement maybe in place with the company? And these are then metrics that the team gets evaluated on. And we can look then, do we need to improve our processes? Have we missed something? And so I think that's also a sign of health, is that things aren't getting stuck, and if they do, because we're a large organization, it's normal that things get stuck, and many of these things are, we're forging new ground. So it's, I think, also normal that not everything is a completely smooth path, but then that we're addressing and able to react to hiccups that occur in a very fast and professional way, and then also learn from those hiccups so that they hopefully don't happen to the next founder. And so I think that's balancing, quantitative metrics, but also listening then to the anecdotal evidence from both inside ETH, but then also our trusted community. So these are the VCs who are, looking in and seeing from the outside, the term sheets that are coming from ETH. And I think being open to listening to them is also extremely important for a university.
So what's the average time frame?
Well, that's one of the big
Is it still 2 weeks?
We relax that. So if a company is willing to accept all the standard terms and conditions of ETH, we promise that they'll get my signature in a month. And of course, if they then need a more special arrangement or aren't on board with the standard terms, then a negotiation, of course, will take more time. Sometimes there's also one hurdle is always, if IP isn't fully owned by ETH, then we can't just simply license something that we don't fully own. And many times in academic research. There have been many partners and many organizations involved in developing an idea. And so that's always one thing that can slow the process if there are many owners of the IP. But I think one of the things we've tried to do with the new IP, with the equity and licensing policy at ETH, is provide options. So we don't just have one single option. We have a range of different equity terms and royalty terms. So if you want your royalties to decrease, then equity goes up a bit, but we allow the founders to choose. So we have 4 options, and it's founder's choice. We don't try to say all material science spinoffs have to choose these terms, or all biomedical spinoffs have to choose these terms. We really let the founders and their investors look at the business case and choose the terms that they think is most relevant. And we've tried to really create aggressive, and I'd say aggressively founder-friendly conditions to hopefully minimize the number of companies that feel the need to negotiate, because we already feel like we're giving them sort of the best deal that we can. And these include things, I think one big change we made was saying we're not going to start collecting royalties until 5 million Swiss francs of annual revenue. And the idea there is, ETH as a university who's supported the research for many years should of course benefit, but we want to do that once the company is making a substantial revenue. We don't want to be taking money from the company as they're struggling to build up their business. And so we try to make it very practical and something where everyone can sort of sit around at the table and say, okay, well, maybe we would have done it slightly differently, but because we care about the speed and the efficiency, let's just all agree and sign here.
Which is very adaptive to companies' reality, I would say.
Yeah.
And to the amount of complete unknown territory.
Yeah. That's
So
very
why
true.
bother? Just
Yeah, I think Frank made this point earlier in the podcast, but I think this was a really important set of discussions we had is, a lot of times if you're coming from a background of being an IP attorney or working in industry that's a very established market, you spend a lot of time trying to value intellectual property. And I think that definitely has its place. And when there's an established business, an established market, and a known revenue, then you can really price IP in a meaningful way. I think the reality is, from a university, it's often just an idea, and there's maybe going to be a decade more work and twists and turns and plots. And maybe that idea and that IP will wind up in a product, but we don't really know. So our approach was to look, and we did a review of the last 10 years of all licensing income, revenues, equity deals we had at ETH, and tried to then make the percentage equity and the fees we have for various licensing or sale, for instance, of software based on what roughly makes sense, and we're not, because it's rare that we saw, we took a bit more royalty here and that really had a difference financially 5 years later. I mean, we can't really correlate that because it's just too early stage.
Yeah. And if you could introduce one additional change or an initiative at ETH to support future founders, what would be the first thing that you would do, Frank?
Well, so my observation is ETH founders are very much in love with your tech, when I think they should be more in love with making money. And introducing them to pilot projects, to clients, just going out there and seeing whatever they want to sell, is actually anybody there who wants to buy it, and what will be the price for that? I think that is something that cannot be introduced early enough, because otherwise they stay in the lab for 5 more years, come up with the perfect solution nobody has asked for, right? And that, I think, can be a very almost traumatic experience, because they think, no, this is going to be amazing. In the meantime, the Chinese did it already, or something else happened, and it's not going to be a success. So being early enough out there in touch with the market to see what is actually needed, right? I think that would be very helpful.
So making them prepping them for the reality that they'll step into.
Sooner or later, yes.
Yeah. And looking into the future, Vanessa, how do you see the collaboration between ETH and other Swiss institutions evolving?
Well, I think, it's been really fun seeing how our changes at ETH have also created a conversation in Switzerland. I think Frank and the team have many good connections with the entrepreneurship teams of other universities. And I think often what we see is that many times successful companies also take founders who are alumni of multiple universities. And so we try to also support those connections, both at the administrative level, but also within our founder community. And I think that's one reason why our new accelerator, we allow and we encourage teams, also including non-ETH alums, to also join and can get funding from us.
And before we finish this conversation, we always do a little rapid fire round. So I'll say something or ask you a question, and you just have to say the first thing that pops into your head. So I'll just go, and then you can both shoot at the same time if you want. So what is one habit that you developed early in your career that you still rely on today?
I think I have not developed it as early as I should have, but I have developed the habit of really valuing my sleep.
Oh, that's a good one.
And I worship my sleep. I need my 8 hours or things not going to work. So sleep. Exclamation mark. Especially for all the young founders who think they can sleep when they're dead. And so, no. If you don't sleep one night, you have like 1.5 promille alcohol level type of reaction. So sleep.
I think for me, I would answer understanding things and trying to understand the complexity, understand things fully, and then creating a solution based on that understanding. That's something we try to do in our research, but I think it also applies to academic administration. If you don't understand the problem, it's very hard to develop creative solutions, especially in complex organizations. And I think that's one of the reasons Frank and I were successful, is we took the time to understand what the problem was and how it could change and the potential repercussions that would have, and come up with a solution that works.
Both very good habits. What's one thing you wish every first-time academic founder understood before starting a company?
Technology alone does not a good company make.
Mine is similar. It's about revenue and profitability, not VC money raised.
I'll leave that there. So nothing more to add. Love it. A part of the new regulations you think founders will appreciate the most once they've gone through the process?
So I think you can differentiate there, right? I think for the startup founder, it's really this new label, which I think is really going to help them a lot. I would have been very happy to have that label in 99 when I started Tempo Brain. And for the spin-off founder, I think this express licensing path should really make hopefully their life much easier.
Yeah.
I would say just generally the transparency that it brings.
Knowing where you're at, what's happening. And now lastly, one word you'd like entrepreneurs to associate with ETH entrepreneurship in 5 years.
I'd say support.
I'd say inspiration.
What wonderful words to finish this conversation with. Thank you both so much for taking the time and sharing everything about the programs that you have and also the whole ecosystem that you run and that you support. And I think I'm very excited to see what comes out, or like which great companies will still come out of ETH entrepreneurship. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Merle.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.